the mandate for the Australian Reserve Bank is they're supposed to look at price stability and full employment and economic prosperity for the Australian people. In reality, it's inflation targeting a goal of 2 to 3%. Now, to me, this is a problem because what it leads to is a real deprioritisation of the goal of full employment. And of course, that term full employment has been the meaning of it has become confused because of the NAIRU and, the natural rate of unemployment that economists adopt. And so Australian citizens many probably don't realise that when economists talk about full employment, they're really saying we accept 4 to 5% unemployment. Now, what this means is that the unelected Reserve Bank is sort of making these really crucial decisions. Currently, we're seeing it play out currently in Australia, this big effort to fight inflation, which is too high, and historically low unemployment. The Reserve Bank and the government sort of agree sometimes you catch them saying it explicitly, that soon historically low unemployment is going to rise, right? So there is this decision being made by unelected technocrats in the Reserve Bank that Australians will be made unemployed, growth will be slowed, rates will be increased, growth will be slowed, and unemployment will be increased to control inflation. And you get this strange dynamic where the elected government adopts a sort of passive fiscal stance so as not to contradict the efforts of the Reserve Bank to control inflation. And I think this has contributed to a sense of economic reform inertia. I think one of the key problems to come out of this is that in public policy discussions now, there is a sense that this is the orthodoxy. This is the orthodoxy and it can't be questioned, even though this approach has really only been formalised in Australia over the last few decades. And I don't see enough discussion about the economic reforms needed to truly address inequality, for example, or to achieve true full employment, as used to be the bipartisan goal of governments in the post-war era.
To ask a really direct question, because Shireen said it very clearly, central banks slow down the economy to make people unemployed. Would you be as direct as that? Because I think people would be surprised if they found out that a role of the central bank in a modern economy is to make more of them unemployed.
Well, that's not, no. I think what Shireen was trying to say is that's the current scenario, because we've had, since February of last year when Russia invaded Ukraine, we've had inflation really take off based on the restrictions of certain commodities being exported out of that region, especially energy and wheat and so on. That's where we're at now. It's not that central banks exist universally all the time to make people unemployed. One of the central and most
important... Are they doing that right now?
Yes. And actually, was it yesterday or the day before, the Fed, this is basically what was said, that, more people will have to become unemployed for us to get this inflation rate down to where we would like it to be. So there is this trade-off between inflation and unemployment, right? The more that governments spend, or the more money that's printed in the economy, the more economic activity is generated, the more jobs are created.
Shireen, I remember reading somewhere you said that this kind of trade-off between inflation and unemployment was, I think, to quote you, you said it's a tragedy. Would you like to give us a wee bit more detail on why you think that it's so unfair that it's the poorest people in society who pay the price for keeping prices down?
Yeah, and it's not only a tragedy. Can I just to add to what Marla just said? It also doesn't make sense because also in Australia there is widespread acknowledgement that current inflation is primarily driven by supply issues, right? That are out of control, out of our domestic control. not primarily driven by too much money in the economy, and certainly not driven by wages, because Australians have had decades of wage stagnation, and now with rising prices, real wages are going backwards, right? And yet you have the Reserve Bank Governor, Philip Lowe, saying, you workers, you all need to tame your wage expectations, lest we be forced to raise the unemployment rate. He actually sort of said something along those lines towards the end of last year, right?
Yeah, and that was the Bank of England said something very similar as well.
So just think about it. Workers are being asked to pay through low wages, and some through losing their livelihoods, for inflation they did not cause, right? Because there is agreement that one, current inflation is primarily caused by supply issues, and two, there is growing acknowledgement that inflation is also caused by corporations with pricing power rising prices. So corporations making the most of supply issues, making the most of current hype about inflation, and increasing prices to increase profits.
This is all happening in an economic environment where benefits are being reduced.
Yeah.
The central bank is saying you've got to be unemployed, right? But they're unemployed when benefits are really, really low. And so that's like being punished for being unemployment. And in many cases, especially from Westminster, the unemployed are vilified for not finding work. So basically there's a system that's designed to make these people unemployed. It needs them to be unemployed, but they're punished and shamed for being unemployed. And as you said, and I picked up on that really clearly because that's exactly what I believe, that's a tragedy that people are backed into this corner, and there must be another way. There must be other mandates that the central bank can follow.